Good morning, good afternoon. Welcome, everyone, and thanks so much for joining today's conversation. I think as a kind of quick topic check and to make sure everyone's in the right room, we're going to be talking today about the business impact of enterprise lean agility, which as I look at the kind of, direct relationship to what's going on right now, I think these types of topics tend to be the most important things to talk about. As always, our goal today is to really have a fruitful conversation at an industry level. And to facilitate that, I'd like to thank and welcome our panelists for being here. So we're joined by Alan Gerner from UST Global, as well as Jorge Centeno from Santander Bank. I am certainly honored to be in presence with both of you. I think there's a whole lot that we can talk about today. And Alan, I'd like to thank UST for sponsoring and being able to host this as well. When I kind of take a step back and before I ask you both to really introduce yourselves, I think some ground rules, right? I want to make sure we're talking about things that we actually really kind of know about, right? And so I want to make sure that we define some of the terms. I want to make sure that we've got the right guidelines in terms of, what we're actually trying to accomplish and tackle here. And also, I want to keep it practical. I think a lot of times these types of conversations, they get very floated, pie in the sky, ivory tower. Oh, here's the stuff that can possibly happen. Let's talk about real practical opportunities, things that really have worked, things that haven't worked, and let's be able to share as much as we can. So with that, now that we've laid out those ground rules, I will pass over and perhaps, Alan, if you want to introduce yourself and also take a moment and please define for us really what is lean agility. I know what lean is roughly, but maybe we can start there. And I know what agile is roughly, but how do we combine the two? What does it mean for you? And then Jorge, I'll ask you to do the same.
Okay, very good. So my name is Al Gerner again, and I am the managing director for the Lean Agility practice at UST Global. I've been in the Agile world for 22 years. I've been in the IT and information systems world for 35 plus years. For me, Lean agility is a natural complement. It's the merging of lean philosophy with agile philosophy, and they're natural complements to each other. Sometimes people think that they're contradictory. To me, what agile is about is it's really about behaviors. It's about changing behaviors to be really focused on what your goals are. The best definition I ever found was actually a definition about athletic agility. And they differentiated that it was 6 different major traits. And to me, as soon as I saw this, I saw the business value of these. Balance, whether it's demand capacity balance or risk value balance, or whether it's the balance of different conflicting priorities. We want balance in our business. Coordination, coordinate everybody who's involved in trying to bring value to the market, not just the people who are in IT, not just the people who are in the business, but the entire value stream. Speed, needless to say, but it's not just time to market, it's also time to recognition for an opportunity. It's also, the time to realize and actually see the impact that you have. And there's reflexes, being able to, sense and respond to change, quickly. And it's strength, having technical strength, having strength in the marketplace. And it is endurance, the ability to just keep doing it and innovating time after time. Leanness, in contrast, is in some ways much simpler. It is about loosening constraints. It is about moving waste in a process. It's about flow through an organizational structure. And the two of them, performance, improvement in one case and waste removal in the other case, work really well together.
Excellent. Jorge?
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Well, it's also for me an honor, and thank you for the invitation for you, Anthony and Alan. I'm very excited to be here and to share a little bit, as you mentioned, Anthony, in a very practical way, how we are in our organization put in place this Lean Agile methodology, which I will cover in a minute. Nowadays, I'm the head of digital transformation for Santander Bank in the US. I have been in banking for almost 26 years, mainly in Mexico. Okay, my connection with the Lean Agile, let's say, methodology and way of work has been since like 7 years ago when we started our transformation process in Mexico. And so I'm in terms of your answering your question, Anthony, in terms of what it means for us as a business, and I will probably repeat some of the concept of Alan, but in a different way. In terms of saying, for me, this is it's about alignment, okay, from top to bottom. So what we are pursuing, what we really want to conquer in the future, and align the organizations towards an objective and a business objective. Okay, we always try to refer, or probably most of people could think that when we are talking about lean and agile, it's a methodology of just doing projects within technology, which is, I think it's something broader that could be applied somehow in another topics and another way. And so it's a way of doing business driven by value, which is also very important. You really put in the context the value that you are offering to your customer. Okay, and I will probably surprise the audience in terms of saying there are two different customers within the organizations: internal customers and external customers. So you could take this way of doing business for both, and you could really gain value for both, and really get things done. And finally, it's because you have an alignment. We are talking about teamwork. Okay, so you break silos and you work together and have success together. So around the different areas of the organization.
So there's some interesting stuff in there that I want to pull apart, and maybe bear with me a moment, because I think, first of all, digital transformation is one of those terms. Personally, I am loath to use it. Every time it comes up, it always feels like it is a race to the bottom in terms of marketing. It's, it's just the natural kind of cadence of what happens in this industry is people latch onto a term and conflate it and say, oh, we just implemented VoIP. Now we're, digital transformation. It's like, well, no, that's not really it, right? So, Jorge, obviously you have digital transformation in your title, which means someone somewhere decided explicitly that, this is now the thing that you're doing. What is the objective? What are you doing for digital transformation? Why are you doing it?
Well, doing digital transformation, I would say that today is not an option. And I will probably, again, trying to define the concepts. Digital transformation, it's really gather the opportunities that now the market is giving to the organizations and to the customer. Okay, embracing technology. That's for sure. No, but it's not just, as I mentioned, just about technology. So for us, it's trying to speed up the pace of our evolution in terms of guiding that opportunities. And there's good, and again, being practical, we will talk about opportunities when you increase your revenue, your market share, or when you save costs. So those two things could be reached through the digital transformation. That again, most of the time you use technology to really tackle those opportunities. But also it's something convenient for the customer. So we need to understand that for the customer, it's having opportunities and be more and interact more convenient in a convenient way with, in our case, with our bank. So that's a little bit for
and so, I think to a certain extent, part of the challenge is always understanding what is digital transformation, right? Alan, I know you've worked with a lot of different companies, a lot of different customers from a UST perspective. What is digital transformation?
Well, Jorge and I talked about this a little bit, and I think we're both agreed. The key thing about digital transformation is it's not about the technology. It's about a fundamental shift in the way that you think about your business. Same thing with agility. Agility and digital go hand in hand with each other. And the least, oddly enough, the least impact is when agility is kept just within the walls of the IT department. The greatest impact is when it's actually elevated and the business starts changing the way that they think about their own business and the enterprise level. So business and enterprise agility is the most important thing about it. Digital transformation includes agile and lean, but it also includes just a different way that you look towards your customers. It's about putting the customers in the center and value in the center, as Jorge said. And it's about thinking about rapid, because its foundation is technological, it has a lot of, that speed to market, about speed to reaction and to observe, recognize opportunities. That to me is the key thing about digital transformation is, that's what makes it different.
I hear a lot of descriptors around, what it includes, what are kind of parts of it or things about it, but I'm still not hearing what it is. And so, I'll pause it because I think you're both describing pieces of it, and it is customer centric. I agree, but what actually is it? We still haven't quite touched on. And I know it involves technology, and I know it involves lean, and I know it involves agile, and I know it involves, all of this experimentation and innovation, but what is it, right? At the end of this, Jorge, if the outcome of what your customers want is now magically you're a potato chip company, is that a direction that you would be willing to embrace as a function of digital transformation, right? Is it full business transformation? Does it mean that today we're a bank and tomorrow we're something else? Or what's kind of, where did you start? What's the end? What's the journey? What's the outcome? Like, I just really want to get away from talking about digital transformation and actually figuring out what it is.
I will return and let me you're touching different points as we did, but if you force me to define it, it's the way that we conduct our business and we evolve in order to satisfy customer satisfaction within our industry.
Okay. Now we've got a working guideline. I like that. I like that.
Yeah.
So now it doesn't say that we're going to completely change the business. It says that we're going to adapt the business. We're going to evolve. We're going to focus on evolving towards what the customer wants, and we're going to do it with the strength of the assets that we've built and the things that we have inside. So, in some ways, personally, I would probably call it digital evolution, but I think digital transformation is at least a term we all understand. So, what is now the relationship? At least maybe, and actually maybe a practical example, since Jorge, you've just been through this, what was the relationship between Lean, Agile, and digital transformation in your role?
Okay, again, we embrace this because we think has the right elements in terms of putting a methodology to work together and break the silos. Okay, because when you really sit down, in a round table, different team members of the different areas, and we are talking about business, technology, risk, compliance, legal, marketing, all that members in one, and I will let you explain how this evolved. It's not just to the first day you put it in a table and you go for it. No, but when you have that conversation openly, you decide on the spot what you need to change in order to satisfy the customer or react because your competitor is doing X or Y, which is appealing for the customer. Okay, so we really change the way we conduct ourselves towards the satisfaction of the customer needs.
Who gets to initiate that conversation? I'm just thinking through this, right? Because the reality is, and I got to imagine, first of all, trying to get, 12 people in the room to agree on a pizza, let alone the direction of a business. I mean, it is just, naturally a challenge. And so I think that the two kind of questions that come to mind for me, one is, first of all, how do you even start that conversation? How do you get people to the table? How do you actually get them in the room to have that conversation? Because you're already starting from a position of status quo. We all know inertia is probably the biggest reason, why do you do the things you do? Well, we've always done them that way, right? So why are we doing them a different way? Well, there's a reason. What was that first kind of starting point? And really, I'll call it that. How do you get people to the table conversation? But the second piece is, there's got to be some detractors. There's got to be objections. There's got to be the antibodies in the organization that come up and say, whoa, 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 that's not how we do stuff. And whoa, 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 agile, there's no outcome. We don't know what's going to be on the other side of this. I want a waterfall process and budget and requirements, and I want to know exactly where we're going to land. So I'm just curious, between those two, what has been your experience? And maybe Alan, will start with you, but as you kind of see this, how do you get people to the table? And then even more than that, really, how do you overcome the objections?
Well, let me offer to your earlier question, what is digital, transformation? What is the digital evolution? Try this one as a thing, because I consider this to be an essential characteristic. One of the key things about digital is it's removed all the intermediaries between you and your customer. One of the things about digital is that this device gets you immediate access to that customer. You're not translating through product managers. You're not translating through what comes into your call center. You have immediate feedback that you can gain. You can start, immediately pushing customized stuff to the customer. When you still, Jorge, I'll use the example of a bank. When a customer has to come to the bank, that's subordinating them to the bank. Now in digital, the bank comes to the customer. The gap has narrowed tremendously, and the interpretation has been removed. And oftentimes, traditionally, we went through multiple levels of interpretation. To me, that's the essence of what digital transformation, why it's so revolutionary.
So I like that, but just to play devil's advocate for a moment, if I make a mobile app for my customers, then am I done? Have I digitally transformed?
No, not at all. Because the essential piece is, how do you stay close to your customers? How do you get closer to your customers? Again, the old modes don't work anymore. The key thing to me now, to come to your question, is the pace of change has been continually accelerating since the 1980s. It's one of the presentations, and one of the ways that I get past the objections is I've got a presentation where I just talk about economics. I talk about economics, and that really is my passion. Is I go and talk to C-levels and executive VPs, and I say, let's not talk about technology. I'm going to talk to you about agility and leanness from a totally non-technical perspective. We're going to talk about economics, and it's going to be hard-edged stuff. We'll actually talk about some of the formulas, but we'll talk about the dynamics of how you make decisions. And that presentation has convinced more people. I've presented that to about 3,500 people globally in about 16 countries. And that is what changed C-levels' minds, is when they started to see that agility wasn't an IT thing, it's a business thing.
Makes sense. And does that work for the detractors too? Or what happens when you've got these laggards, right? The people who are the ones who, don't want it to happen.
Well, we make a couple of points, and I'll just give two of them. One of them is, because of the accelerating pace of change, if you aren't doing anything new, you're already losing. You're just waiting for your value to decline to zero. All right. If you're not changing, you're not growing. You're declining. So the first thing is, it's just, and I actually demonstrate this in the talk, and it's just an economic dynamic. You must continue to change. That has to be an essential nature, and that's a key part of what agility means. But the second thing about it is, I encourage skeptics. And, oddly, just listening to them and letting them know that, you can take their point seriously and you can actually give practical answers does a lot, because then, it becomes less adversarial and becomes an open conversation about real concerns.
I'm going to call that the carrot method.
That was perfectly fine.
Jorge, let me ask you the same question from a detractor perspective. Carrot or stick?
Sorry?
To go after the carrot, to go after the detractors, the people who are the ones that are in line, that are causing problems, shutting down the project. What do you do?
I think, first of all, and I will answer, well, the other day we were talking about this. I will fire them, period. Okay, but let me go back for a moment before you fire them. Okay, if that's the case, and if that's the last option, do it, change it, no problem at all. Just to be practical. Again, Anthony, you asked for this.
I
Okay?
like it.
So,
I like it.
But let me. You mentioned who should start this, and this should be started by business. Period. Okay, I will say that.
So bringing people to the table, it really has to be led as a business
yes.
initiative. Yeah.
And again, a practical thing. When we decided in Santander, Mexico, to begin this process 7 years ago, the digital factory, okay, was led by a person of business, not technology. Okay. Second, it could come from any line of business, but the top management needs to be convinced to support that, because you will need to empower people, when you start this journey.
And so when you have that group conversation, because I know you're all about collaboration, you're all about teamwork, right? It's almost impossible, maybe not completely, but it's almost impossible to get everybody in the company together, get them all in the same room, right? No. Let alone, choose a direction, right? So who are the right stakeholders to bring? It sounds like you got to have, I'll call it a champion for the program. You got to have somebody who is, they're going to run it, they're going to own it, they're going to be that piece, right? But then you also have to have executive support. You have to have somebody who's going to be kind of on the backstop to make sure that, when things do go wrong, they're going to throw their kind of, weight into it to make things happen. But how do you identify those constituents? How do you identify who the right people are? And how do you make sure that it doesn't go off the rails quickly?
Yeah, I would say that again, you need to have, and you need to start with people that it's convinced to this journey. Okay, so that's and to be convinced, even around the organization, you need to explain. I always want to again, in this practical environment, explain the whys you are doing this. Yeah. It's very, very important. You need to understand. Okay, we're lagging in I don't want to talk about technology. We're lagging in really respond on time to our customers.
Our customers are upset about this. Let's go solve that.
Yes, exactly. Let's solve this. Okay. So, and even you are going to start small. This is not something that needs to be in your whole company at the same time. That is another key point. But let me finish with the answer. I think you need to have people that really it's a person that could make that change, but also have the support of the C-level in the different ways. Okay. And I will start and I just explaining what we did at some point in my first adventure of this nature. And we started, yes, business with technology. And then little by little, we gained the confidence for a compliance risk. They were part of that starting process, not in a full-time job, let's put it this way, but with a contribution of trying to change the way we were doing things. Okay, and this department has to assign one person that it's not it's a SME, that could take decisions on the spot, in the table, just to maintain the process live and in a good shape and in a good speed. Okay, so it's not that you are going to put all people together in the first round.
No, okay? And that makes sense, right? And we're starting to get some good questions in, which I'll remind everyone just in a few minutes here, we'll start to open up Q&A to the group. So please do feel free to start asking questions using the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. However, we'll get to those in just a moment. I want to press a little bit because I think there's something interesting you said, Jorge, which, start with the business value that's easiest to explain, right? But what at the same time, you have to engage the detractors. I guess, what I'm not hearing, and Alan, maybe you can comment, you're not starting with the one who's ready to raise their hand and do stuff, right? It's not the like, oh, I learned about Agile, or I did Agile at my last company, I really want to own this thing. You're finding, what is that kind of right person that's the right business value that we're going to be able to justify and also
That's
push.
right.
And so it's a very different model than I think many organizations use, right? Is there a danger to going down the like get the excited people to go kind of path, or how does that work?
Well, there are some dangers. I can tell you the fastest way to, fail at an agile or a digital transformation is keep it inside technology.
Mm.
Okay. I have never, when the business is actually leading, agility and understands that it's about the way you do business, when they lead, I've never seen one fail. I have seen, when they weren't led, when they're led by technology, I've seen them succeed, but I've also seen them fail, because the key thing about it is, Agile, when it grows out of technology solely, eventually, it gets large enough that it starts meeting constraints. Risk and compliance is always done traditionally. They assume a traditional, process. So is finance and those sorts of things. If they don't start to morph, then essentially, the animal grows large enough and the collar's too small, and it ends up choking it.
So I think you're onto something there. And I also think if I look at, a couple of these concepts, right? The one thing I haven't heard, because you got to it pretty quick and it actually raises a different answer or a different question. How do you measure success? Like if I look at, is it failing? Is it not failing?
Yep.
When do you say, hey guys, we screwed this up, or hey guys, we're on track? Like, I think sometimes those metrics aren't easy. So how do you actually measure the effectiveness and the success?
Well, from my perspective, when we start an agile engagement with somebody, first thing we have is a business conversation. What are your goals? Why are you wanting to go agile? All right. You don't go agile just for the sake of going agile. All right. Because that almost always will fail as well. You're not doing it because you're following somebody. You're doing it because you want the business to be leading the market to someplace. So we find out exactly what was motivating them to do this. And we do, a lot of pain points analysis and, independently of that to kind of support it. When we understand what they're trying to achieve, then what we do is then we know what we need to measure. We measure to make sure that we're making progress towards their goals. And there's a whole set of process metrics that we can do as to how well we're doing. But ultimately, it's the value to the company.
So Jorge,
we use different metrics all the time.
Yeah, and so Jorge, to get more specific in the context of the work that you did, and really kind of with your journey, what were the metrics, right? And I know you were using Al's framework because obviously you guys have worked together, but what is the what were the metrics that kind of came out of this? What was important for you and Santander?
Yeah, for example, I'm gonna give you the right now the KPIs that we are trying to pursue. It's that we want more users in our digital channels. No, we're still having a lot of people visiting our branches when they have we have digital capabilities. No, we are talking about the engagement of these customers for our digital capabilities. And when we are talking about an engagement, which you could measure in a different ways, is how many digital services or features within our mobile they are using. So because someone could just enter just to get the balance, but
so how many users and how effective those users are, how trained those users are.
Yeah, transactionality could be monetary, non-monetary. So sales so that, and I'm just giving just one case in terms of saying, okay, the usage and the efficiency of the customer using that mobile app that we have in the market.
Yeah.
So go ahead, please, Al.
Yeah, can I add a couple of things? I'll give you a real case study, how you measure these things. I was working with one bank, and they had been working with traditional methods for 9 months trying to build a new digital bank. And they'd produced absolutely nothing. So they decided that they needed to change their way of doing it. And the number one business objective they had at the beginning was, get something deployed and reduce time to market. In 6 weeks, we had a first app done. Now they built it, but we helped them break through the wall that had been standing in front of them this whole time. And they got that. Now, as soon as they got that and they started to see that they can actually produce real value in quick succession, their goal changed. Then their goal was revenue and market share. And so we started introducing, product management, agile product management concepts about how do you test a market, some things about, what Lean Startup calls MVPs, minimum viable products. And as a series of experiments, we started introducing a number of those things. Once they started getting market share, then their goal changed again, about 4 months later. And what it changed to was they wanted to have better quality interactions through the app. And so
how often do those goals change? What's a good rubric to reassess and say, when should we do these goals differently?
The way that we recommend to customers and how we run our transformations is quarterly.
Quarterly, okay.
Quarterly, we reassess, and then we reprioritize, our objectives, and then we do our engagement plan based upon what those current priorities are.
Okay. And that sounds about right for you, Jorge. Is that about the right kind of cadence, or did you find more longer?
My only add in that it's that you need to have a long-term vision of what you are trying to do.
Sure.
No?
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, of course, I'll call it the distance goal is always there. It's the, iterative things along the way that you want to make sure you just reassess and say, okay, did our KPI change this, this quarter versus next quarter? I know we talked a lot about Agile. We didn't talk much about Lean. You threw a little bit in there with this MVP concept, Al, but I want to make sure because, I'm still a little bit at odds. I do think of Lean and Agile as being pretty much, kind of dichotomous, right? One says, you got to experiment a lot. The other one says be as efficient as you can. And I'm not saying they're completely mutually exclusive, but Agile embraces waste to a certain extent. No. So how do you kind of rectify that?
I don't know that it necessarily embraces waste. I think that's it's a fairly common position, but I think it tends to be a false equivalency there. They are, to my view, just complementary. They're yin yang. What Agile really strives towards is trying to have the right behaviors to try to make your decision making better and make your decisions and your actions really optimal. What Lean adds is this. So Agile in some sense is value oriented. Lean in some sense is waste oriented. Agile's trying to drive up value and drive up focus and alignment, as Jorge said earlier, is really important. While Lean is trying to drive down waste, delay times, the amount of features that you put in that never get used, they're marginal features. There's an interesting statistic that says 45% of all the features ever built into a piece of software have never been used.
I've used Excel. I think the number's higher.
Yes, that's exactly.
Well, no, and I think that's a good point. And actually, a part of the conversation, and maybe just kind of turning to some of the questions from the audience here. Obviously, customer experience, is important, right? And getting aligned against the customer experience. You can force customers into your digital channel, but the experience is good for them too. So I guess how are you measuring, Jorge, what that customer experience is? Using the features in the app is one way to certainly do that. And I know that's one of your KPIs, but are you also doing, and aligning against things like CSAT and aligning against, those types of interactions? Getting customers to actually give you feedback is probably the worst customer experience that anybody ever has. So there have to be other kind of KPIs. What are the practical things that you're looking at?
No, we're measuring NPS, Net Promoter Score,
Sure.
Through surveys, directly after the customer is using, and we divide an effort. We divided between a feature that probably they go and use Cell, for example, in our great Cell, and see if there is satisfaction over there. And then the overall digital experience, for example. So that's the way that we are, and we have really trying to put surveys with our customers that they are, I would say, fairly glad to answer. Don't put a lot of questions. Be very tactical
Be
in that
targeted,
way.
focused.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Are you
Focus on
happy?
that.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think let's go back to the beginning of an agile project for the moment, or the beginning of a business transformation or a digital transformation project. I think there's a couple of different questions here that I'll group into kind of the same category. So when you're starting out, and probably as you are ongoing, but how do you prioritize? You know, is it about financial return, performance improvement, business reputation improvement, and my concern would be that sometimes what happens when you are getting collaboration from everyone, to your point, Jorge, you know, it's about the loudest voice, and that may not necessarily be the right answer, right? So, you know, if enough people all say, oh, we think we should be rowing in this direction, the tendency might be to capitulate, right? It might just say, look, well, everyone wants it, let's go in that direction, when in reality it could be completely, you know, segmented and disconnected from the business. So how do you prioritize, and how do you really kind of measure the effectiveness of that prioritization? I'll open that to either of you.
Mm-hmm. I'll start. There will always be, you know, different voices with different kinds of priorities. Honestly, one of the things is that our process for trying to, you know, do strategic planning for, you know, a transformation is to encourage conversations. First, you have to get the, you know, the real stakeholders at the table.
Sure.
Sometimes that's really hard because the stakeholders may be, you know, at the C level, and they delegate this down sometimes 2 and 3 levels. And that's levels of translation. No, get the real stakeholders at the table and have them put things up. So we use, you know, techniques like affinity mapping, you know, when you draw on the stickies and you just put them on the wall and you group them, and it actually works. What is important about those techniques is that it encourages the conversation. Mm-hmm. Second technique that we use is that we make, you know, people make the business case. You know, what would this actually impact? Is it going to be impacting revenue, market share, you know, quality and customer retention? Is it going to be, you know, what is it going to impact, and where are we now? So they have to bring the statistics to the table. You know, where are we now? Where do you want, what's your target? What will be the impact? Is there a revenue impact there? Is there, a decrease in your, you know, customer loss? You know, coach it, you know, couch the whole conversation in an economic framework. That has worked best for us.
I also think the other thing that's missing in that, but it's probably also inherent, is what I'll call timeline, right? You know, if the reality is, listen, let's set, you know, and I always like the concept of SMART goals, there has to be a time associated with it. So we all want all these things, but if we want to raise our revenue by the end of 2021, this is what we have to do to get there, and that's more realistic than improve our reputation or to, you know, all these other metrics, right? So
yeah, that's right. A lot of corporate KPIs are at too high an abstract level. One of the key things that we try to teach people is how to refine a metric down into other metrics that actually contribute to it, and then down again, so that you actually get to things that are actionable at different levels of planning.
Yep, I think that
and
makes
measurable.
Sense.
You know, and that's a fine art, you know, and a lot of people don't have it.
For sure. Jorge, I think, you know, obviously this concept of carrot and stick, and you know, obviously carrot until stick is perhaps appropriate. What do you do when the detractor in the organization is a senior leader, let's call it the CEO, let's call it the COO or the CFO, or somebody who effectively does control and can sabotage the outcome?
Yeah, show the results. Again, we're talking about KPIs. So if you, that's why it's very important when you are going to choose the measure of the success, because that's the only way that really you could convince those detractors, no? And show them that. So let's put it this way. If the CEO has doubts in terms of saying if he or she could embrace this change, okay, give a chance, raise your hands, give a chance and say, give me some resources, give me some money, and I will show you. But define, again, the measures to define success. and you will convince that, and you need to even, yeah, when you are talking about trying to fix the reputation of your company, and you could measure that, and it's going to be a long-term process. Forget about it. Don't put
Well,
that in your pipeline.
And if you can't convince them with the metrics, and eventually, then you find a new job, right? I mean, that's kind of the bottom line, right? I mean, at some point, rolling the ball uphill is going to be too painful.
Go to another.
There have been some great questions so far asked that are really centering around this relationship between technology and business, and so I'm gonna group a couple of those together as well. I think we've talked a lot about how this needs to be a business-led initiative and a business collaborative initiative, right? So the concern I would have is, it's almost like we're saying, well, look, technology is kind of, secondary. Don't think about it that way. But what is the right time, and how do you start the conversation around technology being a driver in this, right? And how do you actually get, technology to engage? What is the role of technology leadership in that conversation, right? Because it can't just be, I'll call it some level of a supporting role, or can it?
From my perspective, you have to start with that relationship from the beginning. And consequently, one of the key things about, the fastest way to fail at, any kind of transformation is decide next Monday, we're all going to go agile, or we're all going to go digital. You fail whenever you try to roll it out uniformly. No, what you do is you use the wedge technique. You find somebody in the business who is enthusiastic about reaching a business goal and doing something that they want to do innovative. Then you match them with somebody. So that business person has to understand the technology. Then you find somebody in the technology group that understands the business, and you put those people together as partners. And then you focus on making them a visible success. One customer, it was really interesting. We try to make sure that there is a success achieved every quarter in some manner. Now that actually has, positive and significant business impact. Another fast way to fail is, go and do your experiment with digital and agile over in some little corner, and choose a project that you don't care if it fails. No. You have to choose a project that will really build your reputation if it succeeds. That's the real art. So you have to start with those partners, and you start
don't take
with
a half swing. Don't be afraid to fail.
That's right. And you have to find the thing and make a visible success. In this one company, we had 110 people originally in the digital bank that we were working with. When we did our first, quarterly strategic planning session, there were 250 people in the room. Because they had seen what had happened the previous, quarter, and it was so impressive. They wanted to find out, what the heck are you doing? What are you doing that's different? I want some of this. That's what you do. Transformation is a process of seduction.
That to me, that's the culture shift. And Jorge, how long have you been on this journey now? 7 years, you said?
7 years.
7 years. I'd love to understand for you, was there a practical moment when that culture shift happened? What were those early indicators of success that you kind of saw these types of things start to play out? And how do you measure some of the benefits of that culture shift? Is it tied to revenue? Is it tied to speed? Are those process KPIs that Al was talking about earlier? Or maybe give us some real life examples.
Yes. Well, when I will probably add on Juan Alan and answering your question in terms of bring IT out of the gate. So and don't. This is not like how you call it. This is something that they need also to be convinced, and so you need to share with them the goals, and they need to understand that for them to develop, we need to do business. So they need to feel that they are part of the business. Okay, I will recommend the audience to start. I just started reading this book that it was recommended by the CEO of Santander Mexico just 2 weeks ago, and I'm just started to read it. But just the introduction, it was great, and it says, "Ask your developer." Okay, so please write down, start reading that. It answer just like this. But when we understand that we are making that change of mindset. It's when we start to celebrate together. That's when you accomplish something, you are having fun. We need to recognize as a business that technology it's a partner, that we cannot go anywhere without them. Okay, so when you start treating differently your technology partners, that they are not developers, that needs to be in the oldest and worst building of the company, because sometimes we treat it like them. So where is the cheapest land in the country? Put it over there. No, and they are not feel part of the business. They are not feel part of the success of the company. So
I love that you're consistent across your collaboration as both being the method as well as the measurement across all of this. And I think that I love that concept of when we celebrate together, when you finally feel like this is not a win that this group had or that group had, but we had this win together. I think that's a good indicator. I have good news and bad news. The good news is I think we covered a lot of ground in 45 minutes. The bad news is I think we're just about out of time. But the even better news is for all those listening in, for all those who are paying attention, by all means, if you have questions you want to ask Alan, you want to ask Jorge, we can certainly direct those. I know we only got through a handful of the questions that people had asked, and I always wish like we had another 2 or 3 hours to talk about this stuff. But in the day and age where pace of change has been so fast, I think the reality is we all only have a few minutes to talk, but I'd like to thank both of you very much. Thank you, Jorge, for sharing your perspective. Al, thank you for sharing your expertise as well. So certainly we are doing a lot more of these types of things for those of you listening in, and we'll let you know when the next one is. But thank you everyone for joining, and thank you to our esteemed panelists for leading this conversation. Be well.
Thank you.
Thank you. A pleasure. Thank you, everyone.